hello, and welcome. Tonight, we step gently into one of the most enchanting fairy tales ever told. There's nothing you need to do right now. Just settle in, breathe a little slower, and let the day drift away. If this space brings you comfort, you're always welcome to stay by liking the video or subscribing, but only if it truly feels right to you. I love knowing where these stories travel. So if you wish, leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time the night has reached for you. Now lower the lights. Let a soft sound fill the room and allow yourself to be carried slowly, calmly into tonight's story. The Fox and the Geese. The fox once came to a meadow in which was a flock of fine, fat geese, on which he smiled and said, "I come in the nick of time. You are sitting together quite beautifully, so that I can eat you up, one after the other." The geese, cackled with terror, sprang up and began to wail and beg piteously for their lives. But the fox would listen to nothing and said, "There is no mercy to be had. You must die." At length, one of them took heart and said, "If we poor geese are to yield up our vigorous young lives, show us the only possible favor and allow us one more prayer that we may not die in our sins. And then we will place ourselves in a row so that you can always pick yourself out the fattest." "Yes," said the fox, "that is reasonable and a pious request. Pray away. I will wait till you are done." Then the first began a good long prayer, forever saying, "Gaga." And as she would make no end, the second did not wait until her turn came, but began also, "Gaga." The third and fourth followed her, and soon they were all cackling together. When they have done praying, the story shall be continued further, but at present they are still praying without stopping. The 7 Swabians. 7 Swabians were once together. The first was Master Schultz, the second Jockli, the third Marley, the fourth Jurgli, the fifth Michal, the sixth Hans, the seventh Veitli. All 7 had made up their minds to travel about the world to seek adventures and perform great deeds. But in order that they might go in security and with arms in their hands, they thought it would be advisable that they should have one solitary but very strong and very long spear made for them. This spear all 7 of them took in their hands at once. In front walked the boldest and bravest, and that was Master Schultz. All the others followed in a row, and Veitli was the last. Then it came to pass one day in the haymaking month July, when they had walked a long distance and still had a long way to go before they reached the village where they were to pass the night, that as they were in a meadow in the twilight, a great beetle or hornet flew by them from behind a bush and hummed in a menacing manner. Master Schultz was so terrified that he all but dropped the spear, and a cold perspiration broke out over his whole body. "Hark, hark," cried he to his comrades. "Good heavens, I hear a drum." Jackly, who was behind him, holding the spear, and who perceived some kind of a smell, said, "Something is most certainly going on, for I taste powder and matches." At these words, Master Schultz began to take to flight, and in a trice jumped over a hedge. But as he just happened to jump on to the teeth of a rake, which had been left lying there after the haymaking, the handle of it struck against his face and gave him a tremendous blow. "Oh dear! Oh dear!" screamed Master Schultz. "Take me prisoner. I surrender. I surrender." The other 6 all leapt over, one on the top of the other, crying, "If you surrender, I surrender too. If you surrender, I surrender too." At length, as no enemy was there to bind and take them away, they saw that they had been mistaken, and in order that the story might not be known, and they be treated as fools and ridiculed, they all swore to each other to hold their peace about it, until one of them accidentally spoke of it. Then they journeyed onwards. The second danger which they survived cannot be compared with the first. Some days afterwards, their path led them through a fallow field where a hare was sitting sleeping in the sun. Her ears were standing straight up, and her great glassy eyes were wide open. All of them were alarmed at the sight of the horrible wild beast, and they consulted together as to what it would be the least dangerous to do. For if they were to run away, they knew that the monster would pursue and swallow them whole. So they said, "We must go through a great and dangerous struggle. Boldly ventured is half won." And all 7 grasped the spear, Master Schultz in front and Veitli behind. Master Schultz was always trying to keep the spear back, but Veitli had become quite brave while behind and wanted to dash forward, and cried, "Strike home in every Swabian's name, or else I wish ye may be lame." But Hans knew how to meet this, and said, "Thunder and lightning, it's fine to prate, but for dragon hunting thou'rt I too late." Michal cried, "Nothing is wanting, not even a hare. Be sure the devil himself is there." Then it was Jurgli's turn to speak. "If it be not, it's at least his mother, or else it's the devil's own stepbrother." And now Marley had a bright thought, and said to Veitli, "Advance, Veitli, advance, advance, and I behind will hold the lance." Veitli, however, did not attend to that, and Jackli said, 'Tis Schultz's place the first to be. No one deserves that honor but he." Then Master Schultz plucked up his courage and said gravely, "Then let us boldly advance to the fight, and thus we shall show our valor and might." Hereupon they all together set on the dragon. Master Schultz crossed himself and prayed for God's assistance. But as all this was of no avail, and he was getting nearer and nearer to the enemy, he screamed, "Oh, oh." In the greatest anguish, this awakened the hare, which in great alarm darted swiftly away. When Master Schultz saw her thus flying from the field of battle, he cried in his joy, "Quick, vaitly quick, look there, look there. The monster's nothing but a hare." But the Swabian allies went in search of further adventures, and came to the Moselle, a mossy, quiet, deep river, over which there are few bridges, and which in many places people have to cross in boats. As the 7 Swabians did not know this, they called to a man who was working on the opposite side of the river to know how people contrived to get across. The distance and their way of speaking made the man unable to understand what they wanted, and he said, What, in the way people speak in the neighborhood of Treves." Master Schultz thought he was saying, "Wade, wade through the water." And as he was, the first began to set out, and went into the Moselle. It was not long before he sank in the mud, and the deep waves which drove against him. But his hat was blown on the opposite shore by the wind, and a frog sat down beside it, and croaked, What? The other 6 on the opposite side heard that, and said, "Oh ho ho, comrades, Master Schultz is calling us. If he can wade across, why cannot we?" So they all jumped into the water together in a great hurry, and were drowned, and thus one frog took the lives of all 6 of them, and not one of the Swabian allies ever reached home again. The Queen Bee. 2 kings' sons once started to seek adventures, and fell into a wild, reckless way of living, and gave up all thoughts of going home again. Their 3rd and youngest brother, who was called Wittling, and had remained behind, started off to seek them. And when at last he found them, they jeered at his simplicity in thinking that he could make his way in the world, while they, who were so much cleverer, were unsuccessful. But they all 3 went on together until they came to an ant-hill, which the 2 eldest brothers wished to stir up, that they might see the little ants hurry about in their fright, and carrying off their eggs. But Wittling said, "Leave the little creatures alone. I will not suffer them to be disturbed." And they went on farther, until they came to a lake where a number of ducks were swimming about. The two eldest brothers wanted to catch a couple and cook them, but Witling would not allow it, and said, "Leave the creatures alone. I will not suffer them to be killed." And then they came to a bee's nest in a tree, and there was so much honey in it that it overflowed and ran down the trunk. The two eldest brothers then wanted to make a fire beneath the tree that the bees might be stifled by the smoke, and then they could get at the honey. But Witling prevented them, saying, "Leave the little creatures alone. I will not suffer them to be stifled." At last, the three brothers came to a castle, where there were, in the stables, many horses standing all of stone. And the brothers went through all the rooms until they came to a door at the end, secured with 3 locks, and in the middle of the door, a small opening through which they could look into the room. And they saw a little gray-haired man sitting at a table. They called out to him once, twice, and he did not hear. But at the 3rd time he got up, undid the locks, and came out. Without speaking a word, he led them to a table loaded with all sorts of good things, and when they had eaten and drunk, he showed to each his bedchamber. The next morning, the little gray man came to the eldest brother, and beckoning him, brought him to a table of stone, on which were written 3 things, directing by what means the castle could be delivered from its enchantment. The first thing was that in the wood under the moss lay the pearls belonging to the princess, 1,000 in number, and they were to be sought for and collected, and if he who should undertake the task had not finished it by sunset, if but 1 pearl were missing, he must be turned to stone. So the eldest brother went out and searched all day, but at the end of it, he had only found 100. Just as was said on the table of stone came to pass, and he was turned into stone. The second brother undertook the adventure next day, but it fared with him no better than with the first. He found 200 pearls and was turned into stone. And so, at last, it was Witling's turn, and he began to search in the moss. But it was a very tedious business to find the pearls, and he grew so out of heart that he sat down on a stone and began to weep. As he was sitting thus up, came the ant king with 5,000 ants, whose lives had been saved through Witling's pity. And it was not very long before the little insects had collected all the pearls and put them in a heap. Now the second thing ordered by the table of stone was to get the key of the princess's sleeping chamber out of the lake. And when Witling came to the lake, the ducks whose lives he had saved came swimming and dived below and brought up the key from the bottom. The third thing that had to be done was the most difficult, and that was to choose out the youngest and loveliest of the 3 princesses as they lay sleeping. all bore a perfect resemblance, each to the other, and only differed in this, that before they went to sleep, each one had eaten a different sweetmeat. The eldest a piece of sugar, the second a little syrup, and the third a spoonful of honey. Now the queen bee of those bees that Witling had protected from the fire came at this moment, and trying the lips of all three, settled on those of the one that had eaten honey. And so it was that the king's son knew which to choose. Then the spell was broken. Everyone awoke from stony sleep and took their right form again. And Witling married the youngest and loveliest princess, and became king after her father's death. But his two brothers had to put up with the two other sisters. Gambling. Hansel. Once upon a time, there was a man who did nothing but gamble, and for that reason, people never called him anything but Gambling Hansel. And as he never ceased to gamble, he played away his house and all that he had. Now the very day before his creditors were to take his house from him, came the Lord and Saint Peter, and asked him to give them shelter for the night. Then Gambling Hansel said, "For my part, you may stay the night, but I cannot give you a bed or anything to eat." So the Lord said he was just to take them in, and they themselves would buy something to eat, to which Gambling Hansel made no objection. Thereupon Saint Peter gave him 3 groschen, and said he was to go to the baker's and fetch some bread. So Gambling Hansel went. But when he reached the house where the other gambling vagabonds were gathered together, they, although they had won all that he had greeted him clamorously, and said, "Hansel, do come in." "Oh," said he, "do you want to win the 3 groschen too?" On this they would not let him go. So he went in and played away the 3 groschen also. Meanwhile, Saint Peter and the Lord were waiting, and as he was so long in coming, they set out to meet him. When Gambling Hansel came, however, he pretended that the money had fallen into the gutter, and kept raking about in it all the while to find it. But our Lord already knew that he had lost it in play. Saint Peter again gave him 3 groschen, and now he did not allow himself to be led away once more, but fetched them the loaf. Our Lord then inquired if he had no wine, and he said, "Alack, sir, the casks are all empty." But the Lord said he was to go down into the cellar, for the best wine was still there. For a long time he would not believe this, but at length he said, "Well, I will go down, but I know that there is none there." When he turned the tap, however, lo, and behold, the best of wine ran out. So he took it to them, and the 2 passed the night there. Early next day, our Lord told Gambling Hansel that he might beg 3 favors. The Lord expected that he would ask to go to heaven, but Gambling Hansel asked for a pack of cards with which he could win everything, for dice, with which he would win everything, and for a tree whereon every kind of fruit would grow, and from which no one who had climbed up could descend until he bade him do so. The Lord gave him all that he had asked, and departed with St. Peter. And now gambling Hansel at once set about gambling in real earnest, and before long he had gained half the world. Upon this, St. Peter said to the Lord, "Lord, this thing must not go on, he will win, and thou lose the whole world. We must send Death to him." When Death appeared, gambling Hansel had just seated himself at the gaming table, and Death said, "Hansel, come out a while." But gambling Hansel said, "Just wait a little until the game is done, and in the meantime get up into that tree out there and gather a little fruit that we may have something to munch on our way." Thereupon, Death climbed up. But when he wanted to come down again, he could not, and gambling Hansel left him up there for 7 years, during which time no one died. So St. Peter said to the Lord, "Lord, this thing must not go on. People no longer die. We must go ourselves." And they went themselves, and the Lord commanded Hansel to let Death come down. So Hansel went at once to Death and said to him, "Come down." And Death took him directly and put an end to him. They went away together and came to the next world. And then gambling Hansel made straight for the door of heaven and knocked at it. "Who is there?" Gambling Hansel. "Ah, we will have nothing to do with him. Be gone." So he went to the door of purgatory and knocked once more. "Who is there?" Gambling Hansel. "Ah, there is quite enough weeping and wailing here without him. We do not want to gamble. Just go away again." Then he went to the door of hell, and there they let him in. There was, however, no one at home but old Lucifer and the crooked devils who had just been doing their evil work in the world. And no sooner was Hansel there than he sat down to gamble again. Lucifer, however, had nothing to lose but his misshapen devils, and gambling Hansel won them from him, as with his cards he could not fail to do. And now he was off again with his crooked devils, and they went to Hohenfuhr and pulled up a hop pole, and with it went to heaven, and began to thrust the pole against it, and heaven began to crack. So again St. Peter said, "Lord, this thing cannot go on. We must let him in, or he will throw us down from heaven." And they let him in. But gambling Hansel instantly began to play again, and there was such a noise and confusion that there was no hearing what they themselves were saying. Therefore, St. Peter once more said, "Lord, this cannot go on. We must throw him down, or he will make all heaven rebellious." So they went to him at once and threw him down, and his soul broke into fragments and went into the gambling vagabonds who are living this very day. the Golden Goose. There was a man who had 3 sons, the youngest of whom was called the Simpleton, and was despised, laughed at, and neglected on every occasion. It happened one day that the eldest son wished to go into the forest to cut wood, and before he went, his mother gave him a delicious pancake and a flask of wine, that he might not suffer from hunger or thirst. When he came into the forest, a little old gray man met him, who wished him good day, and said, "Give me a bit of cake out of your pocket, and let me have a drink of your wine. I am so hungry and thirsty." But the prudent youth answered, "Give you my cake and my wine. I haven't got any. Be off with you." And leaving the little man standing there, he went off. Then he began to fell a tree. But he had not been at it long before he made a wrong stroke, and the hatchet hit him in the arm, so that he was obliged to go home and get it bound up. That was what came of the little gray man. Afterwards, the second son went into the wood, and the mother gave to him, as to the eldest, a pancake and a flask of wine. The little old gray man met him also, and begged for a little bit of cake and a drink of wine. But the second son spoke out plainly, saying, "What I give you, I lose myself, so be off with you." And leaving the little man standing there, he went off. The punishment followed. As he was chopping away at the tree, he hit himself in the leg so severely that he had to be carried home. Then said the simpleton, "Father, let me go for once into the forest to cut wood." And the father answered, "Your brothers have hurt themselves by so doing. Give it up. You understand nothing about it." But the simpleton went on begging so long that the father said at last, "Well, be off with you. You will only learn by experience." The mother gave him a cake. It was only made with water and baked in the ashes, and with it a flask of sour beer. When he came into the forest, the little old gray man met him and greeted him, saying, "Give me a bit of your cake and a drink from your flask. I am so hungry and thirsty." And the simpleton answered, "I have only a flour and water cake and sour beer. But if that is good enough for you, let us sit down together and eat." Then they sat down, and as the simpleton took out his flour and water cake, it became a rich pancake, and his sour beer became good wine. Then they ate and drank, and afterwards the little man said, "As you have such a kind heart, and share what you have so willingly, I will bestow good luck upon you. Yonder stands an old tree. Cut it down, and at its roots you will find something." And thereupon the little man took his departure. The simpleton went there and hewed away at the tree, and when it fell, he saw sitting among the roots a goose with feathers of pure gold. He lifted it out and took it with him to an inn where he intended to stay the night. The landlord had 3 daughters who, when they saw the goose, were curious to know what wonderful kind of bird it was, and ended by longing for one of its golden feathers. The eldest thought, "I will wait for a good opportunity, and then I will pull out one of its feathers for myself." And so, when the simpleton was gone out, she seized the goose by its wing. But there her finger and hand had to stay held fast. Soon after came the second sister, with the same idea of plucking out one of the golden feathers for herself. But scarcely had she touched her sister, then she also was obliged to stay held fast. Lastly came the third with the same intentions, but the others screamed out, "Stay away, for heaven's sake, stay away!" But she did not see why she should stay away, and thought, "If they do so, why should not I?" and went towards them. But when she reached her sisters there, she stopped, hanging on with them. And so they had to stay all night. The next morning, the simpleton took the goose under his arm and went away unmindful of the 3 girls that hung on to it. The 3 had always to run after him, left and right, wherever his legs carried him. In the midst of the fields, they met the parson, who, when he saw the procession, said, "Shame on you, girls, running after a young fellow through the fields like this." And forthwith he seized hold of the youngest by the hand to drag her away, but hardly had he touched her when he too was obliged to run after them himself. Not long after, the sexton came that way, and seeing the respected parson following at the heels of the 3 girls, he called out, "Ho, your reverence, whither away so quickly? You forget that we have another christening today." And he seized hold of him by his gown. But no sooner had he touched him than he was obliged to follow on too. As the 5 tramped on one after another, 2 peasants with their hoes came up from the fields, and the parson cried out to them and begged them to come and set him and the sexton free. But no sooner had they touched the sexton than they had to follow on too. And now there were 7 following the simpleton and the goose. By and by they came to a town where a king reigned, who had an only daughter, who was so serious that no one could make her laugh. Therefore the king had given out that whoever should make her laugh should have her in marriage. The simpleton, when he heard this, went with his goose and his hangers-on into the presence of the king's daughter. And as soon as she saw the 7 people following, always one after the other, she burst out laughing and seemed as if she could never stop. And so the simpleton earned a right to her as his bride. But the king did not like him for a son-in-law, and made all kinds of objections, and said he must first bring a man who could drink up a whole cellar of wine. The simpleton thought that the little gray man would be able to help him, and went out into the forest. And there, on the very spot where he felled the tree, he saw a man sitting with a very sad countenance. The simpleton asked him what was the matter, and he answered, "I have a great thirst, which I cannot quench. Cold water does not agree with me. I have indeed drunk up a whole cask of wine. But what good is a drop like that?" Then said the simpleton, "I can help you. Only come with me, and you shall have enough." He took him straight to the king's cellar, and the man sat himself down before the big vats and drank and drank, and before a day was over, he had drunk up the whole cellar full. The simpleton again asked for his bride, but the king was annoyed that a wretched fellow called the simpleton by everybody should carry off his daughter, and so he made new conditions. He was to produce a man who could eat up a mountain of bread. The simpleton did not hesitate long, but ran quickly off to the forest. And there, in the same place, sat a man who had fastened a strap round his body, making a very piteous face, and saying, "I have eaten a whole bakehouse full of rolls, but what is the use of that when one is so hungry as I am? My stomach feels quite empty, and I am obliged to strap myself together, that I may not die of hunger." The simpleton was quite glad of this, and said, "Get up quickly, and come along with me, and you shall have enough to eat." He led him straight to the king's courtyard, where all the meal in the kingdom had been collected and baked into a mountain of bread. The man out of the forest settled himself down before it and hastened to eat, and in one day the whole mountain had disappeared. Then the simpleton asked for his bride the third time. The king, however, found one more excuse and said he must have a ship that should be able to sail on land or on water. "So soon," said he, "as you come sailing along with it, you shall have my daughter for your wife." The simpleton went straight to the forest, and there sat the little old gray man with whom he had shared his cake. And he said, "I have eaten for you, and I have drunk for you. I will also give you the ship, and all because you were kind to me at the first." Then he gave him the ship that could sail on land and on water, and when the king saw it, he knew he could no longer withhold his daughter. The marriage took place immediately, and at the death of the king, the simpleton possessed the kingdom and lived long and happily with his wife. Sharing joy and sorrow. There was once a tailor who was a quarrelsome fellow, and his wife, who was good, industrious, and pious, never could please him. Whatever she did, he was not satisfied, but grumbled and scolded and knocked her about and beat her. As the authorities at last heard of it, they had him summoned and put in prison in order to make him better. He was kept for a while on bread and water, and then set free again. He was forced, however, to promise not to beat his wife any more, but to live with her in peace and share joy and sorrow with her as married people ought to do. All went on well for a time, but then he fell into his old ways and was surly and quarrelsome. And because he dared not beat her, he would seize her by the hair and tear it out. The woman escaped from him and sprang out into the yard, but he ran after her with his yard measure and scissors, and chased her about, and threw the yard measure and scissors at her, and whatever else came his way. When he hit her, he laughed, and when he missed her, he stormed and swore. This went on so long that the neighbors came to the wife's assistance. The tailor was again summoned before the magistrates and reminded of his promise. "Dear gentleman," said he, "I have kept my word. I have not beaten her, but have shared joy and sorrow with her." "How can that be," said the judge, "when she continually brings such heavy complaints against you? I have not beaten her, but just because she looked so strange, I wanted to comb her hair with my hand. She, however, got away from me and left me quite spitefully. Then I hurried after her, and in order to bring her back to her duty, I threw at her, as a well-meant admonition, whatever came readily to hand. I have shared joy and sorrow with her also, for whenever I hit her, I was full of joy, and she of sorrow. And if I missed her, then she was joyful, and I sorry." The judges were not satisfied with this answer, but gave him the reward he deserved. Cinderella. There was once a rich man whose wife lay sick, and when she felt her end drawing near, she called to her only daughter to come near her bed, and said, "Dear child, be pious and good, and God will always take care of you, and I will look down upon you from heaven, and will be with you." And then she closed her eyes and expired. The maiden went every day to her mother's grave and wept, and was always pious and good. When the winter came, the snow covered the grave with a white covering, and when the sun came in the early spring and melted it away, the man took to himself another wife. The new wife brought 2 daughters home with her, and they were beautiful and fair in appearance, but at heart were black and ugly. And then began very evil times for the poor stepdaughter. "Is the stupid creature to sit in the same room with us?" said they. "Those who eat food must earn it. Out upon her for a kitchen maid." They took away her pretty dresses and put on her an old gray kirtle, and gave her wooden shoes to wear. "Just look now at the proud princess. How she is decked out," cried they, laughing. And then they sent her into the kitchen, There she was obliged to do heavy work from morning to night. Get up early in the morning, draw water, make the fires, cook, and wash. Besides that, the sisters did their utmost to torment her, mocking her, and strewing peas and lentils among the ashes, and setting her to pick them up. In the evenings, when she was quite tired out with her hard day's work, she had no bed to lie on, but was obliged to rest on the hearth among the cinders. And as she always looked dusty and dirty, they named her Cinderella. It happened one day that the father went to the fair, and he asked his 2 stepdaughters what he should bring back for them. "Fine clothes," said one. "Pearls and jewels," said the other. "But what will you have, Cinderella?" said he. "The first twig, father, that strikes against your hat on the way home. That is what I should like you to bring me." So he bought for the 2 stepdaughters fine clothes, pearls and jewels, and on his way back, as he rode through a green lane, a hazel twig struck against his hat, and he broke it off and carried it home with him. And when he reached home, he gave to the stepdaughters what they had wished for, and to Cinderella he gave the hazel twig. She thanked him and went to her mother's grave and planted this twig, there weeping so bitterly that the tears fell upon it, and watered it, and it flourished, and became a fine tree. Cinderella went to see it 3 times a day, and wept and prayed, and each time a white bird rose up from the tree, and if she uttered any wish, the bird brought her whatever she had wished for. Now, it came to pass that the king ordained a festival that should last for 3 days, and to which all the beautiful young women of that country were bidden, so that the king's son might choose a bride from among them. When the 2 stepdaughters heard that they too were bidden to appear, they felt very pleased, and they called Cinderella and said, "Comb our hair, brush our shoes, and make our buckles fast. We are going to the wedding feast at the king's castle." Cinderella, when she heard this, could not help crying, for she too would have liked to go to the dance, and she begged her stepmother to allow her. "What, you Cinderella?" said she, "in all your dust and dirt, you want to go to the festival, you that have no dress and no shoes, you want to dance?" But as she persisted in asking, at last the stepmother said, "I have strewed a dish full of lentils in the ashes, and if you can pick them all up again in 2 hours, you may go with us." Then the maiden went to the back door that led into the garden and called out, "O gentle doves, O turtle doves, and all the birds that be, the lentils that in ashes lie, come and pick up for me. The good must be put in the dish, the bad you may eat if you wish." Then there came to the kitchen window 2 white doves, and after them some turtle doves. and at last a crowd of all the birds under heaven, chirping and fluttering. And they alighted among the ashes. And the doves nodded with their heads and began to pick, peck, pick, peck. And then all the others began to pick, peck, pick, peck, and put all the good grains into the dish. Before an hour was over, all was done, and they flew away. Then the maiden brought the dish to her stepmother, feeling joyful, and thinking that now she should go to the feast. But the stepmother said, "No, Cinderella, you have no proper clothes, and you do not know how to dance, and you would be laughed at." And when Cinderella cried for disappointment, she added, "If you can pick 2 dishes full of lentils out of the ashes, nice and clean, you shall go with us." Thinking to herself, "For that is not possible." When she had strewed 2 dishes full of lentils among the ashes, the maiden went through the back door into the garden and cried, "O gentle doves, O turtle doves, and all the birds that be, the lentils that in ashes lie, come and pick up for me. The good must be put in the dish. The bad you may eat if you wish." So there came to the kitchen window 2 white doves, and then some turtle doves, and at last a crowd of all the other birds under heaven, chirping and fluttering, and they alighted among the ashes, and the doves nodded with their heads and began to pick, peck, pick, peck. And then all the others began to pick, peck, pick, peck, and put all the good grains into the dish. And before half an hour was over, it was all done, and they flew away. Then the maiden took the dishes to the stepmother, feeling joyful, and thinking that now she should go with them to the feast. But she said, "All this is of no good to you. You cannot come with us, for you have no proper clothes, and cannot dance. You would put us to shame." Then she turned her back on poor Cinderella, and made haste to set out with her 2 proud daughters. And as there was no one left in the house, Cinderella went to her mother's grave under the hazel bush and cried, little tree, shake over me, that silver and gold may come down and cover me." Then the bird threw down a dress of gold and silver, and a pair of slippers embroidered with silk and silver. And in all haste she put on the dress and went to the festival. But her stepmother and sisters did not know her, and thought she must be a foreign princess. She looked so beautiful in her golden dress. Of Cinderella they never thought at all, and supposed that she was sitting at home, arid, picking the lentils out of the ashes. The king's son came to meet her, and took her by the hand, and danced with her, and he refused to stand up with anyone else, so that he might not be obliged to let go her hand. And when anyone came to claim it, he answered, "She is my partner." And when the evening came, she wanted to go home. But the prince said he would go with her to take care of her, for he wanted to see where the beautiful maiden lived. But she escaped him and jumped up into the pigeon house. Then the prince waited until the father came and told him the strange maiden had jumped into the pigeon house. The father thought to himself, "It cannot surely be Cinderella," and called for axes and hatchets and had the pigeon house cut down, but there was no one in it. And when they entered the house, there sat Cinderella in her dirty clothes among the cinders, and a little oil lamp burnt dimly in the chimney. For Cinderella had been very quick and had jumped out of the pigeon house again and had run to the hazel bush. And there she had taken off her beautiful dress and had laid it on the grave, and the bird had carried it away again. And then she had put on her little gray kirtle again, and had sat down in the kitchen among the cinders. The next day, when the festival began anew, and the parents and stepsisters had gone to it, Cinderella went to the hazel bush and cried, little tree, shake over me, that silver and gold may come down and cover me." Then the bird cast down a still more splendid dress than on the day before, and when she appeared in it among the guests, everyone was astonished at her beauty. The prince had been waiting until she came, and he took her hand and danced with her alone. And when anyone else came to invite her, he said, "She is my partner." And when the evening came, she wanted to go home, and the prince followed her, for he wanted to see to what house she belonged. But she broke away from him and ran into the garden at the back of the house. There stood a fine, large tree bearing splendid pears. She leapt as lightly as a squirrel among the branches, and the prince did not know what had become of her. So he waited until the father came, and then he told him that the strange maiden had rushed from him, and that he thought she had gone up into the pear tree. The father thought to himself, "It cannot surely be Cinderella," and called for an axe and felled the tree. But there was no one in it. And when they went into the kitchen, there sat Cinderella among the cinders, as usual, for she had got down the other side of the tree and had taken back her beautiful clothes to the bird on the hazel bush, and had put on her old gray kirtle again. On the third day, when the parents and the stepchildren had set off, Cinderella went again to her mother's grave and said to the tree, little tree, shake over me, that silver and gold may come down and cover me." Then the bird cast down a dress the like of which had never been seen for splendor and brilliancy, and slippers that were of gold. And when she appeared in this dress at the feast, nobody knew what to say for wonderment. The prince danced with her alone, and if anyone else asked her, he answered, "She is my partner." And when it was evening, Cinderella wanted to go home, and the prince was about to go with her when she ran past him so quickly that he could not follow her. But he had laid a plan and had caused all the steps to be spread with pitch, so that as she rushed down them, the left shoe of the maiden remained sticking in it. The prince picked it up and saw that it was of gold, and very small and slender. The next morning, he went to the father and told him that none should be his bride save the one whose foot the golden shoe should fit. Then the two sisters were very glad, because they had pretty feet. The eldest went to her room to try on the shoe, and her mother stood by. But she could not get her great toe into it, for the shoe was too small. Then her mother handed her a knife and said, "Cut the toe off, for when you are queen, you will never have to go on foot." So the girl cut her toe off, squeezed her foot into the shoe, concealed the pain, and went down to the prince. Then he took her with him on his horse as his bride, and rode off. They had to pass by the grave, and there sat the two pigeons on the hazel bush, and cried, "There they go, there they go. There is blood on her shoe. The shoe is too small, not the right bride at all." Then the prince looked at her shoe and saw the blood flowing. And he turned his horse round and took the false bride home again, saying she was not the right one, and that the other sister must try on the shoe. So she went into her room to do so, and got her toes comfortably in, but her heel was too large. Then her mother handed her the knife, saying, "Cut a piece off your heel. When you are queen, you will never have to go on foot." So the girl cut a piece off her heel and thrust her foot into the shoe, concealed the pain, and went down to the prince, who took his bride before him on his horse and rode off. When they passed by the hazel bush, the two pigeons sat there and cried, "There they go, there they go. There is blood on her shoe. The shoe is too small. Not the right bride at all." Then the prince looked at her foot and saw how the blood was flowing from the shoe and staining the white stocking. And he turned his horse round and brought the false bride home again. "This is not the right one," said he. "Have you no other daughter?" "No," said the man. "Only my dead wife left behind her a little stunted Cinderella. It is impossible that she can be the bride." But the king's son ordered her to be sent for, but the mother said, "Oh no, she is much too dirty. I could not let her be seen." But he would have her fetched, and so Cinderella had to appear. First, she washed her face and hands quite clean, and went in and curtsied to the prince, who held out to her the golden shoe. Then she sat down on a stool, drew her foot out of the heavy wooden shoe and slipped it into the golden one, which fitted it perfectly. And when she stood up and the prince looked in her face, he knew again the beautiful maiden that had danced with him, and he cried, "This is the right bride." The stepmother and the two sisters were thunderstruck and grew pale with anger. But he put Cinderella before him on his horse and rode off. And as they passed the hazel bush, the two white pigeons cried, "There they go, there they go. No blood on her shoe. The shoe's not too small. The right bride, is she after all?" And when they had thus cried, they came flying after, and perched on Cinderella's shoulders, one on the right, the other on the left, and so remained. And when her wedding with the prince was appointed to be held, the false sisters came hoping to curry favor and to take part in the festivities. So as the bridal procession went to the church, the eldest walked on the right side and the younger on the left, and the pigeons picked out an eye of each of them. And as they returned, the elder was on the left side and the younger on the right, and the pigeons picked out the other eye of each of them. And so they were condemned to go blind for the rest of their days because of their wickedness and falsehood. The Bremen town musicians. There was once an ass whose master had made him carry sacks to the mill for many a long year, but whose strength began at last to fail, so that each day as it came found him less capable of work. Then his master began to think of turning him out, but the ass, guessing that something was in the wind that boded him no good, ran away, taking the road to Bremen. For there he thought he might get an engagement as town musician. When he had gone a little way, he found a hound lying by the side of the road, panting as if he had run a long way. "Now, hold fast, what are you so out of breath about?" said the ass. "Oh dear," said the dog. "Now I am old, I get weaker every day, and can do no good in the hunt. So as my master was going to have me killed, I have made my escape. But now, how am I to gain a living? I will tell you." "What?" said the ass. "I am going to Bremen to become town musician. You may as well go with me and take up music too. I can play the lute and you can beat the drum." And the dog consented, and they walked on together. It was not long before they came to a cat sitting in the road, looking as dismal as 3 wet days. "Now then, what is the matter with you, old shaver?" said the ass. "I should like to know who would be cheerful when his neck is in danger," answered the cat. "Now that I am old, my teeth are getting blunt, and I would rather sit by the oven and purr than run about after mice, and my mistress wanted to drown me. So I took myself off. But good advice is scarce, and I do not know what is to become of me." "Go with us to Bremen," said the ass, "and become town musician. You understand serenading." The cat thought well of the idea and went with them accordingly. After that, the three travelers passed by a yard, and a cock was perched on the gate, crowing with all his might. "Your cries are enough to pierce bone and marrow," said the ass. "What is the matter?" "I have foretold good weather for Lady Day, so that all the shirts may be washed and dried. And now on Sunday morning company is coming, and the mistress has told the cook that I must be made into soup. And this evening my neck is to be wrung, so that I am crowing with all my might while I can." "You had much better go with us, Chanticleer," said the ass. "We are going to Bremen. At any rate, that will be better than dying. You have a powerful voice, and when we are all performing together, it will have a very good effect." So the cock consented, and they went on all four together. But Bremen was too far off to be reached in one day, and towards evening they came to a wood where they determined to pass the night. The ass and the dog lay down under a large tree. The cat got up among the branches, and the cock flew up to the top, as that was the safest place for him. Before he went to sleep, he looked all round him to the 4 points of the compass, and perceived in the distance a little light shining. And he called out to his companions that there must be a house not far off, as he could see a light. So the ass said, "We had better get up and go there, for these are uncomfortable quarters." The dog began to fancy a few bones, not quite bare, would do him good. And they all set off in the direction of the light, and it grew larger and brighter, until at last it led them to a robber's house, all lighted up. The ass, being the biggest, went up to the window and looked in. "Well, what do you see?" asked the dog. "What do I see?" answered the ass. "Here is a table set out with splendid eatables and drinkables, and robbers sitting at it and making themselves very comfortable." "That would just suit us," said the cock. "Yes, indeed, I wish we were there," said the ass. Then they consulted together how it should be managed, so as to get the robbers out of the house, and at last they hit on a plan. The ass was to place his forefeet on the window-sill, the dog was to get on the ass's back, the cat on the top of the dog, and lastly, the cock was to fly up and perch on the cat's head. When that was done at a given signal, they all began to perform their music. The ass brayed, the dog barked, the cat mewed, and the cock crowed. Then they burst through into the room, breaking all the panes of glass. The robbers fled at the dreadful sound. They thought it was some goblin, and fled to the wood in the utmost terror. Then the 4 companions sat down to table, made free with the remains of the meal, and feasted as if they had been hungry for a month. And when they had finished, they put out the lights, and each sought out a sleeping place to suit his nature and habits. The ass laid himself down outside on the dunghill, the dog behind the door, the cat on the hearth by the warm ashes, and the cock settled himself in the cockloft. And as they were all tired with their long journey, they soon fell fast asleep. When midnight drew near, and the robbers from afar saw that no light was burning, and that everything appeared quiet, their captain said to them that he thought that they had run away without reason, telling one of them to go and reconnoiter. So one of them went and found everything quite quiet. He went into the kitchen to strike a light, and taking the glowing, fiery eyes of the cat for burning coals, he held a match to them in order to kindle it. But the cat, not seeing the joke, flew into his face, spitting and scratching. Then he cried out in terror and ran to get out at the back door. But the dog who was lying there ran at him and bit his leg. And as he was rushing through the yard by the dunghill, the ass struck out and gave him a great kick with his hind foot. And the cock, who had been wakened with the noise and felt quite brisk, cried out, "Cock-a-doodle-doo!" Then the robber got back as well as he could to his captain and said, "Oh dear, in that house there is a gruesome witch, and I felt her breath and her long nails in my face. And by the door there stands a man who stabbed me in the leg with a knife. And in the yard there lies a black spectre, who beat me with his wooden club, and above upon the roof there sits the justice who cried, 'Bring that rogue here.' And so I ran away from the place as fast as I could." From that time forward, the robbers never ventured to that house, and the 4 Bremen town musicians found themselves so well off where they were that there they stayed. And the person who last related this tale is still living, as you see. The water of life. There was once a king who had an illness, and no one believed that he would come out of it with his life. He had 3 sons who were much distressed about it, and went down into the palace garden and wept. There they met an old man who inquired as to the cause of their grief. They told him that their father was so ill that he would most certainly die, for nothing seemed to cure him. Then the old man said, "I know of one more remedy, and that is the water of life. If he drinks of it, he will become well again. But it is hard to find." The eldest said, "I will manage to find it," and went to the sick king and begged to be allowed to go forth in search of the water of life, for that alone could save him. "No," said the king, "the danger of it is too great. I would rather die." But he begged so long that the king consented. The prince thought in his heart, "If I bring the water, then I shall be best beloved of my father, and shall inherit the kingdom." So he set out, and when he had ridden forth a little distance, a dwarf stood there in the road, who called to him, and said, "Whither away so fast?" "Silly shrimp," said the prince very haughtily, "it is nothing to do with you," and rode on. But the little dwarf had grown angry, and had wished an evil wish. Soon after this, the prince entered a ravine, and the further he rode, the closer the mountains drew together, and at last the road became so narrow that he could not advance a step further. It was impossible either to turn his horse or to dismount from the saddle, and he was shut in there, as if in prison. The sick king waited long for him, but he came not. Then the second son said, "Father, let me go forth to seek the water," and thought to himself, "If my brother is dead, then the kingdom will fall to me." At first, the king would not allow him to go either, but at last he yielded. So the prince set out on the same road that his brother had taken, and he too met the dwarf, who stopped him to ask whither he was going in such haste. "Little shrimp," said the prince, "that is nothing to thee," and rode on without giving him another look. But the dwarf bewitched him, and he, like the other, rode into a ravine, and could neither go forwards nor backwards. So fare haughty people. As the second son also remained away, the youngest begged to be allowed to go forth to fetch the water, and at last the king was obliged to let him go. When he met the dwarf, and the latter asked him whither he was going in such haste, he stopped, gave him an explanation, and said, "I am seeking the water of life, for my father is sick unto death." "Dost thou know then where that is to be found?" "No," said the prince. "As thou hast borne thyself as is seemly, and not haughtily, like thy false brothers, I will give thee the information, and tell thee how thou mayest obtain the water of life. It springs from a fountain in the courtyard of an enchanted castle, but thou wilt not be able to make thy way to it if I do not give thee an iron wand and 2 small loaves of bread. Strike thrice with the wand on the iron door of the castle, and it will spring open inside, lie 2 lions with gaping jaws. But if thou throwest a loaf to each of them, they will be quieted. Then hasten to fetch some of the water of life before the clock strikes 12, else the door will shut again, and thou wilt be imprisoned." The prince thanked him, took the wand and the bread, and set out on his way. When he arrived, everything was as the dwarf had said. The door sprang open at the 3rd stroke of the wand, and when he had appeased the lions with the bread, he entered the castle and came to a large and splendid hall wherein sat some enchanted princes, whose rings he drew off their fingers. A sword and a loaf of bread were lying there, which he carried away. After this, he entered a chamber in which was a beautiful maiden, who rejoiced when she saw him, kissed him, and told him that he had delivered her and should have the whole of her kingdom, and that if he would return in a year, their wedding should be celebrated. Likewise, she told him where the spring of the water of life was, and that he was to hasten and draw some of it before the clock struck 12. Then he went onwards, and at last entered a room where there was a beautiful, newly made bed. And as he was very weary, he felt inclined to rest a little. So he lay down and fell asleep. When he awoke, it was striking 11:45. He sprang up in a fright, ran to the spring, drew some water in a cup, which stood near, and hastened away. But just as he was passing through the iron door, the clock struck 12, and the door fell to with such violence that it carried away a piece of his heel. He, however, rejoicing at having obtained the water of life, went homewards, and again passed the dwarf. When the latter saw the sword and the loaf, he said, "With these thou hast won great wealth. With the sword thou canst slay whole armies, and the bread will never come to an end." But the prince would not go home to his father without his brothers, and said, "Dear dwarf, canst thou not tell me where my 2 brothers are? They went out before I did in search of the water of life, and have not returned." "They are imprisoned between 2 mountains," said the dwarf. "I have condemned them to stay there because they were so haughty." Then the prince begged until the dwarf released them. But he warned him, however, and said, "Beware of them, for they have bad hearts." When his brothers came, he rejoiced and told them how things had gone with him, that he had found the water of life, and had brought a cupful away with him, and had rescued a beautiful princess who was willing to wait a year for him. And then their wedding was to be celebrated, and he would obtain a great kingdom. After that, they rode on together, and chanced upon a land where war and famine reigned, and the king already thought he must perish, for the scarcity was so great. Then the prince went to him and gave him the loaf, wherewith he fed and satisfied the whole of his kingdom. And then the prince gave him the sword also, wherewith he slew the hosts of his enemies, and could now live in rest and peace. The prince then took back his loaf and his sword, and the 3 brothers rode on. But after this, they entered 2 more countries, where war and famine reigned, and each time the prince gave his loaf and his sword to the kings, and had now delivered 3 kingdoms. And after that, they went on board a ship, and sailed over the sea. During the passage, the two eldest conversed apart and said, "The youngest has found the water of life, and not we, for that our Father will give him the kingdom which belongs to us, and he will rob us of all our fortune." They then began to seek revenge and plotted with each other to destroy him. They waited until they found him fast asleep. Then they poured the water of life out of the cup and took it for themselves, but into the cup they poured salt seawater. Now therefore, when they arrived home, the youngest took his cup to the sick king in order that he might drink out of it and be cured. But scarcely had he drunk a very little of the salt seawater than he became still worse than before. And as he was lamenting over this, the two eldest brothers came and accused the youngest of having intended to poison him, and said that they had brought him the true water of life, and handed it to him. He had scarcely tasted it when he felt his sickness departing, and became strong and healthy as in the days of his youth. After that, they both went to the youngest, mocked him, and said, "You certainly found the water of life, but you have had the pain, and we the gain. You should have been sharper, and should have kept your eyes open. We took it from you whilst you were asleep at sea, and when a year is over, one of us will go and fetch the beautiful princess. But beware that you do not disclose aught of this to our father. Indeed, he does not trust you. And if you say a single word, you shall lose your life into the bargain. But if you keep silent, you shall have it as a gift." The old king was angry with his youngest son, and thought he had plotted against his life. So he summoned the court together, and had sentence pronounced upon his son that he should be secretly shot. And once, when the prince was riding forth to the chase, suspecting no evil, the king's huntsman had to go with him, and when they were quite alone in the forest, the huntsman looked so sorrowful that the prince said to him, "Dear huntsman, what ails you?" The huntsman said, "I cannot tell you, and yet I ought." Then the prince said, "Say openly what it is, I will pardon you." "Alas," said the huntsman, "I am to shoot you dead. The king has ordered me to do it." Then the prince was shocked and said, "Dear huntsman, let me live. There I give you my royal garments. Give me your common ones in their stead." The huntsman said, "I will willingly do that. Indeed, I should not have been able to shoot you." Then they exchanged clothes, and the huntsman returned home. The prince, however, went further into the forest. After a time, 3 wagons of gold and precious stones came to the king for his youngest son, which were sent by the 3 kings who had slain their enemies with the prince's sword, and maintained their people with his bread, and who wished to show their gratitude for it. The old king then thought, "Can my son have been innocent?" and said to his people, Would that he were still alive. How it grieves me that I have suffered him to be killed." "He still lives," said the huntsman. "I could not find it in my heart to carry out your command," and told the king how it had happened. Then a stone fell from the king's heart, and he had it proclaimed in every country that his son might return and be taken into favor again. The princess, however, had a road made up to her palace, which was quite bright and golden, and told her people that whosoever came riding straight along it to her would be the right wooer, and was to be admitted, and whoever rode by the side of it was not the right one, and was not to be admitted. As the time was now close at hand, the eldest thought he would hasten to go to the king's daughter and give himself out as her deliverer, and thus win her for his bride, and the kingdom to boot. Therefore he rode forth, and when he arrived in front of the palace and saw the splendid golden road, he thought it would be a sin and a shame if he were to ride over that, and turned aside and rode on the right side of it. But when he came to the door, the servants told him that he was not the right man, and was to go away again. Soon after this, the second prince set out, and when he came to the golden road, and his horse had put one foot on it, he thought it would be a sin and a shame to tread a piece of it off, and he turned aside and rode on the left side of it. And when he reached the door, the attendants told him he was not the right one, and he was to go away again. When at last the year had entirely expired, the third son likewise wished to ride out of the forest to his beloved, and with her forget his sorrows. So he set out, and thought of her so incessantly, and wished to be with her so much, that he never noticed the golden road at all. So his horse rode onwards, up the middle of it, and when he came to the door, it was opened, and the princess received him with joy, and said he was her deliverer, and lord of the kingdom, and their wedding was celebrated with great rejoicing. When it was over, she told him that his father invited him to come to him, and had forgiven him. So he rode thither, and told him everything, how his brothers had betrayed him, and how he had nevertheless kept silence. The old king wished to punish them, but they had put to sea, and never came back as long as they lived. The Mouse, the Bird, and the Sausage. Once upon a time, a mouse, a bird, and a sausage formed a partnership. They kept house together, and for a long time they lived in peace and prosperity, acquiring many possessions. The bird's task was to fly into the forest every day to fetch wood. The mouse carried water, made the fire, and set the table. The sausage did the cooking. Whoever is too well off always wants to try something different. Thus one day, the bird chanced to meet another bird, who boasted to him of his own situation. this bird criticized him for working so hard while the other two enjoyed themselves at home. For after the mouse had made the fire and carried the water, she could sit in the parlor and rest until it was time for her to set the table. The sausage had only to stay by the pot, watching the food cook. When mealtime approached, she would slither through the porridge or the vegetables, and thus everything was greased and salted and ready to eat. The bird would bring his load of wood home. They would eat their meal and then sleep soundly until the next morning. It was a great life. The next day, because of his friend's advice, the bird refused to go to the forest, saying that he had been their servant long enough. He was no longer going to be a fool for them. Everyone should try a different task for a change. The mouse and the sausage argued against this, but the bird was the master, and he insisted that they give it a try. The sausage was to fetch wood, the mouse became the cook, and the bird was to carry water. And what was the result? The sausage trudged off toward the forest. The bird made the fire, and the mouse put on the pot and waited for the sausage to return with wood for the next day. However, the sausage stayed out so long that the other two feared that something bad had happened. The bird flew off to see if he could find her. A short distance away, he came upon a dog that had seized the sausage as free booty and was making off with her. The bird complained bitterly to the dog about this brazen abduction, but he claimed that he had discovered forged letters on the sausage, and that she would thus have to forfeit her life to him. Filled with sorrow, the bird carried the wood home himself and told the mouse what he had seen and heard. They were very sad, but were determined to stay together and make the best of it. The bird set the table while the mouse prepared the food. She jumped into the pot, as the sausage had always done, in order to slither and weave in and about the vegetables and grease them. But before she reached the middle, her hair and skin were scalded off, and she perished. When the bird wanted to eat, no cook was there. Beside himself, he threw the wood this way and that, called out, looked everywhere. But no cook was to be found. Because of his carelessness, the scattered wood caught fire, and the entire house was soon aflame. The bird rushed to fetch water, but the bucket fell into the well, carrying him with it, and he drowned. The Old Woman in the Wood. A poor servant girl was once traveling with the family, with which she was in service, through a great forest. And when they were in the midst of it, robbers came out of the thicket and murdered all they found. All perished together, except the girl who had jumped out of the carriage in a fright and hidden herself behind a tree. When the robbers had gone away with their booty, she came out and beheld the great disaster. Then she began to weep bitterly and said, "What can a poor girl like me do? Now I do not know how to get out of the forest. No human being lives in it, so I must certainly starve." She walked about and looked for a road, but could find none. When it was evening, she seated herself under a tree, gave herself into God's keeping, and resolved to sit waiting there and not go away, let what might happen. When, however, she had sat there for a while, a white dove came flying to her with a little golden key in its mouth. It put the little key in her hand and said, "Dost thou see that great tree therein? Is a little lock it opens with the tiny key, and there thou wilt find food enough, and suffer no more hunger." Then she went to the tree and opened it, and found milk in a little dish and white bread to break into it, so that she could eat her fill. When she was satisfied, she said, "It is now the time when the hens at home go to roost. I am so tired, I could go to bed too." Then the dove flew to her again, and brought another golden key in its bill, and said, "Open that tree there, and thou wilt find a bed." So she opened it, and found a beautiful white bed, and she prayed God to protect her during the night, and lay down and slept. In the morning, the dove came for the third time, and again brought a little key, and said, "Open that tree there, and thou wilt find clothes." And when she opened it, she found garments beset with gold, and with jewels more splendid than those of any king's daughter. So she lived there for some time, and the dove came every day and provided her with all she needed, and it was a quiet, good life. Once, however, the dove came and said, "Wilt thou do something for my sake?" "With all my heart," said the girl. Then said the little dove, "I will guide thee to a small house. Enter it, and inside it an old woman will be sitting by the fire, and will say, 'Good day.' But on thy life give her no answer. Let her do what she will, but pass by her on the right side. Further on, there is a door, which open, and thou wilt enter into a room where a quantity of rings of all kinds are lying, amongst which are some magnificent ones with shining stones. Leave them, however, where they are, and seek out a plain one, which must likewise be amongst them, and bring it here to me as quickly as thou canst." The girl went to the little house and came to the door. There sat an old woman, who stared when she saw her, and said, "Good day, my child." The girl gave her no answer, and opened the door. "Whither away?" cried the old woman, and seized her by the gown, and wanted to hold her fast, saying, "That is my house. No one can go in there if I choose not to allow it." But the girl was silent, got away from her, and went straight into the room. Now there lay on the table an enormous quantity of rings which gleamed and glittered before her eyes. She turned them over and looked for the plain one, but could not find it. While she was seeking, she saw the old woman, and how she was stealing away and wanting to get off with a bird cage which she had in her hand. So she went after her and took the cage out of her hand, and when she raised it up and looked into it, a bird was inside, which had the plain ring in its bill. Then she took the ring and ran quite joyously home with it, and thought the little white dove would come and get the ring, but it did not. Then she leant against a tree and determined to wait for the dove. And as she thus stood, it seemed just as if the tree was shut and pliant, and was letting its branches down. And suddenly the branches twined around her and were two arms, and when she looked round, the tree was a handsome man who embraced and kissed her heartily and said, "Thou hast delivered me from the power of the old woman, who is a wicked witch. She had changed me into a tree, and every day for 2 hours I was a white dove, and so long as she possessed the ring, I could not regain my human form." Then his servants and his horses, who had likewise been changed into trees, were freed from the enchantment also, and stood beside him. And he led them forth to his kingdom, for he was a king's son, and they married and lived happily. The White Bride and the Black One. A woman was going about the unenclosed land with her daughter and her stepdaughter, cutting fodder, when the Lord came walking towards them in the form of a poor man, and asked, "Which is the way into the village?" "If you want to know," said the mother, "seek it for yourself." And the daughter added, "If you are afraid you will not find it, take a guide with you." But the stepdaughter said, "Poor man, I will take you there, come with me." Then God was angry with the mother and daughter, and turned his back on them, and wished that they should become as black as night, and as ugly as sin. To the poor stepdaughter, however, God was gracious and went with her, and when they were near the village, he said a blessing over her, and spake, "Choose 3 things for thyself, and I will grant them to thee." Then said the maiden, "I should like to be as beautiful and fair as the sun." And instantly she was white and fair as day. "Then I should like to have a purse of money, which would never grow empty." That the Lord gave her also. But he said, "Do not forget what is best of all." Said she, "For my 3rd wish I desire after my death to inhabit the eternal kingdom of heaven." That also was granted unto her, and then the Lord left her. When the stepmother came home with her daughter, and they saw that they were both as black as coal and ugly, but that the stepdaughter was white and beautiful, wickedness increased still more in their hearts, and they thought of nothing else but how they could do her an injury. The stepdaughter, however, had a brother called Reginer, whom she loved much, and she told him all that had happened. Once on a time, Reginer said to her, "Dear sister, I will take thy likeness, that I may continually see thee before mine eyes. For my love for thee is so great, that I should like always to look at thee." Then she answered, "But I pray thee let no one see the picture." So he painted his sister and hung up the picture in his room. He, however, dwelt in the king's palace, for he was his coachman. Every day he went and stood before the picture and thanked God for the happiness of having such a dear sister. Now it happened that the king whom he served had just lost his wife, who had been so beautiful that no one could be found to compare with her, and on this account the king was in deep grief. The attendants about the court, however, remarked that the coachman stood daily before this beautiful picture, and they were jealous of him, so they informed the king. Then the latter ordered the picture to be brought to him, and when he saw that it was like his lost wife in every respect, except that it was still more beautiful, he fell mortally in love with it. He caused the coachman to be brought before him and asked whom the portrait represented. The coachman said it was his sister, so the king resolved to take no one but her as his wife, and gave him a carriage and horses and splendid garments of cloth of gold, and sent him forth to fetch his chosen bride. When Reginer came on this errand, his sister was glad, but the black maiden was jealous of her good fortune, and grew angry above all measure, and said to her mother, "Of what use are all your arts to us now, when you cannot procure such a piece of luck for me?" "Be quiet," said the old woman. "I will soon divert it to you." And by her arts of witchcraft she so troubled the eyes of the coachman that he was half blind, and she stopped the ears of the white maiden so that she was half deaf. Then they got into the carriage. First the bride in her noble royal apparel, then the stepmother with her daughter, and Reginer sat on the box to drive. When they had been on the way for some time, the coachman cried, "Cover thee well, my sister, dear, that the rain may not wet thee, that the wind may not load thee with dust, that thou mayest be fair and beautiful when thou appearest before the king." The bride asked, "What is my dear brother saying?" "Ah," said the old woman, "he says that you ought to take off your golden dress and give it to your sister." Then she took it off and put it on the black maiden, who gave her in exchange for it a shabby gray gown. They drove onwards, and a short time afterwards the brother again cried, "Cover thee well, my sister, dear, that the rain may not wet thee, that the wind may not load thee with dust, that thou mayst be fair and beautiful when thou appearest before the king. The bride asked, "What is my dear brother saying?" "Ah," said the old woman, "he says that you ought to take off your golden hood and give it to your sister." So she took off the hood and put it on her sister, and sat with her own head uncovered. And they drove on farther. After a while, the brother once more cried, "Cover thee well, my sister, dear, that the rain may not wet thee, that the wind may not load thee with dust, that thou mayst be fair and beautiful when thou appearest before the king." The bride asked, "What is my dear brother saying?" "Ah," said the old woman, "he says you must look out of the carriage." They were, however, just on a bridge which crossed deep water. When the bride stood up and leant forward out of the carriage, they both pushed her out, and she fell into the middle of the water. At the same moment that she sank, a snow-white duck arose out of the mirror-smooth water and swam down the river. The brother had observed nothing of it, and drove the carriage on until they reached the court. Then he took the black maiden to the king as his sister, and thought she really was so, because his eyes were dim, and he saw the golden garments glittering. When the king saw the boundless ugliness of his intended bride, he was very angry, and ordered the coachman to be thrown into a pit which was full of adders and nests of snakes. The old witch, however, knew so well how to flatter the king and deceive his eyes by her arts that he kept her and her daughter until she appeared quite endurable to him, and he really married her. One evening, when the black bride was sitting on the king's knee, a white duck came swimming up the gutter to the kitchen and said to the kitchen boy, "Boy, light a fire that I may warm my feathers." The kitchen boy did it and lighted a fire on the hearth. Then came the duck and sat down by it and shook herself and smoothed her feathers to rights with her bill. While she was thus sitting and enjoying herself, she asked, "What is my brother Reginer doing?" The scullery boy replied, "He is imprisoned in the pit with adders and with snakes." Then she asked, "What is the black witch doing in the house?" The boy answered, "She is loved by the king and happy." "May God have mercy on him," said the duck, and swam forth by the sink. The next night she came again and put the same questions, and the third night also. Then the kitchen boy could bear it no longer, and went to the king and discovered all to him. The king, however, wanted to see it for himself, and next evening went thither, and when the duck thrust her head in through the sink, he took his sword and cut through her neck, and suddenly she changed into a most beautiful maiden, exactly like the picture which her brother had made of her. The king was full of joy, and as she stood there, quite wet, he caused splendid apparel to be brought, and had her clothed in it. Then she told how she had been betrayed by cunning and falsehood, and at last thrown down into the water, and her first request was that her brother should be brought forth from the pit of snakes. And when the king had fulfilled this request, he went into the chamber where the old witch was, and asked, "What does she deserve? Who does this and that?" and related what had happened. Then was she so blinded that she was aware of nothing, and said, "She deserves to be stripped naked, and put into a barrel with nails, and that a horse should be harnessed to the barrel, and the horse sent all over the world." All of which was done to her and to her black daughter. But the king married the white and beautiful bride, and rewarded her faithful brother, and made him a rich and distinguished man. The Flail from Heaven. A countryman was once going out to plow with a pair of oxen. When he got to the field, both the animals' horns began to grow, and went on growing. And when he wanted to go home, they were so big that the oxen could not get through the gateway for them. By good luck, a butcher came by just then, and he delivered them over to him, and made the bargain, in this way, that he should take the butcher a measure of turnip seed, and then the butcher was to count him out a Brabant thaler for every seed. I call that well sold. The peasant now went home and carried the measure of turnip seed to him on his back. On the way, however, he lost one seed out of the bag. The butcher paid him justly as agreed on, and if the peasant had not lost the seed, he would have had one thaler the more. In the meantime, when he went on his way back, the seed had grown into a tree which reached up to the sky. Then thought the peasant, "As thou hast the chance, thou must just see what the angels are doing up there above, and for once have them before thine eyes." So he climbed up and saw that the angels above were threshing oats, and he looked on. While he was thus watching them, he observed that the tree on which he was standing was beginning to totter. He peeped down and saw that someone was just going to cut it down. "If I were to fall down from hence, it would be a bad thing," thought he, and in his necessity, he did not know how to save himself better than by taking the chaff of the oats which lay there in heaps, and twisting a rope of it. He likewise snatched a hoe and a flail which were lying about in heaven, and let himself down by the rope. But he came down on the earth exactly in the middle of a deep, deep hole. So it was a real piece of luck that he had brought the hoe, for he hoed himself a flight of steps with it, and mounted up, and took the flail with him as a token of his truth, so that no one could have any doubt of his story.